Well, you can catch our next guest alongside Beth Mowens, Jay Feely, and Amanda Renner this Sunday, 1 o'clock, as the Ravens take on the Colts on the NFL on CBS. It is always a pleasure to be joined by the Hall of Famer, James Lofton, who is with us here on GCR. James, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's so good to catch up. Thank you so much for taking the time for us this morning.
Well, it's great being here. Ravens off to a good start, so we're looking forward to the ball game.
James, I am really finding it hard to not get carried away about what the Ravens did last week. And I get it, like it's week 2 and let's not get too overwhelmed, but everything that they have going on injury-wise to go into Cincinnati just the fact that the offense looked as sharp as it did, I'm really struggling to not suddenly say, all right, this might be, maybe the best team in the AFC. This might be the team. I'm really struggling to not get carried away about what this team did last week.
Well, it's the early stage, and when you have a team each year, you have to look at like you're raising a child, and you're waiting until this child graduates from college. So this is elementary school. Not that the opponents are elementary opponents, but you're just getting started with the season, and you want some growth, and you saw some growth in this team over what you had seen in previous years, I think.
No, I do. I tend to agree with that, and I think the biggest thing is the questions that we had about, hey, what's this going to look like with a new offensive coordinator in Todd Monken and a new system, and I mean Lamar Jackson looked like he was an orchestra conductor last Sunday. He looked like he had total command of that offense. Is it fair for us to think that might still be ascending, that if that's what it looked like, as he's only playing his second game in that system, that somehow that might still get better as the year goes on?
Well, I think you have to really credit the offensive line because you were able to run the ball, you were able to pass protect, and I think that's the key thing right there for any quarterback who's standing back in the pocket, to be able to look down the field and find the open receiver.
Now, to your point, I thought it was the absolute best that I have seen this offensive line play. I mean, I thought it was one of the great offensive line performances I've ever seen in Ravens history, particularly given who they were without. James, I wonder, what you made of everything the Ravens did in the offseason to finally kind of take some strides at the wide receiver position, to put weapons on the field for Lamar Jackson, to commit to more of a pro-style offense, and what your expectations were coming into the year because of it, and how you feel about the trajectory of where they are with all of it.
Well, I think what we are watching, and we watched it when Lamar came into the league, that we're redefining what a pro-style offense really is. Because look at the quarterbacks who are coming out of college into the NFL draft, getting drafted earlier. They look more like Lamar than they did Johnny Unitas.
I mean, that's certainly fair. There's no question about that. That said, we know that this was an offense that was more committed to running the ball under Greg Roman, and it feels like they were more willing to open it up now moving forward. And obviously, they have not made this type of commitment at wide receiver, certainly since Lamar Jackson's been the quarterback of the team. How important do you think those steps were for taking a step towards being a Super Bowl contender in a loaded AFC?
Well, I think that perception is also reality. And so when you go out and you acquire talented receivers, former first-round picks, Aguilar, OBJ, you draft Zay Flowers early, you are making a commitment that then works in the plan that you have for your offense.
He is James Lofton, the Hall of Famer. He'll be on the call Sunday, 1 o'clock for Ravens-Colts on CBS. James, how concerned are you about this running back situation in Baltimore without J.K. Dobbins? Gus Edwards and Justice Hill looked pretty good a week ago. There are people that think that maybe they should be in the mix for Jonathan Taylor. We don't know if Justice Hill's going to play on Monday. How concerned are you about no J.K. Dobbins moving forward for the Ravens?
Well, a little bit disappointed for J.K. himself.
Yeah.
When you get injured and you have to work your way back, when you're out a year, when you're watching your teammates do what they need to do, that's always tough, and it's never a situation that you want to put any player in.
James, one of the things that I think concerned a lot of Ravens fans coming into the season was the other side of the ball, right? Was that this was a very un-Ravens-like way to build a defense. And we've seen them already depleted in the secondary. Marcus Williams banged up, Marlon Humphrey banged up. But again, they hung on. They played well a week ago. Is this just the way it maybe works now moving forward for the Ravens, that this is the NFL? In the NFL, you don't build the 2000 Baltimore Ravens defense. In the NFL, you got to win games with your offense and maybe do just enough defensively.
Well, when you look back in history and you see the great teams that the Ravens had on paper, it really was focused on the defense, and they were playing a different style of defense than a lot of other teams around the league. Now it's different. You can't hit the way you used to be able to hit. You can't cover the way you used to cover. So those things are kind of taken away a little bit. And if you can put 24 points on the scoreboard and your defense can hold up, you can win a lot of games. And I think that this is the way that this team is structured. And don't forget, they've still got two pretty good inside linebackers, in Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith.
There's no question. That is the strength, the best inside linebacker duo in football. And those players, Patrick Queen in particular, we knew how good Roquan was. Man, Patrick Queen has really come on. James, on the flip side for Sunday, a Colts team that I think everybody wrote off coming into the season. Clearly, we don't know who's going to be on under center. It's not looking great for Anthony Richardson. What, if anything, makes the Colts dangerous on Sunday?
Well, a name that won't be on the field is Gus Bradley, the defensive coordinator. And he's fashioned great defenses everywhere he's been. When he was in Seattle, then when he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars as their head coach. So he always has a nice plan coming in. Simple. The front four get after the quarterback. They don't have to blitz a lot. So when you don't have to blitz, you have guys in coverage. And they can put pressure right up the middle with DeForest Buckner, who is one of the better defensive tackles around the National Football League.
You mentioned guys who aren't going to be on the field, and, of course, Gus Bradley will be at the game. The one guy that definitely won't be at the game, of course, is Jonathan Taylor. What do they do there? It's such a more, you brought up the J.K. thing, and I feel like part of what we're all feeling for J.K. is that it comes in concert with what's happening in the league right now at the running back position. And I don't have answers for it, because I do get that at some point teams are saying, well, we got to save money somewhere, and to pay all these quarterbacks, running back looks like the spot where they're trying to do it, but it's certainly unfair to these players who are going out and battling and grinding. What do the Colts do about Jonathan Taylor? At some point, do they simply have to try to move him for whatever they can get?
Well, the money factor was also an issue. Remember when Jimmy Graham was the hot tight end and he didn't want to be classified as just a tight end? He wanted to be a wide receiver because they made a little more money. Maybe it is the running back position where Austin Eckler, who touched the ball over 300 times last year, maybe you would get a category where, okay, how many touches did you have in your position grouping? Because I think that would determine a lot more your value than just an arbitrary number, as what people talked about as the running back position. Yeah. So it's tough being a running back now, but it sure beats being a running back from the 70s pay period.
Okay, that's fair. That is fair. You're not wrong about that. Do they have to move on? Do they have to? I feel like there's no way that we're going to get 2 weeks down the road and Jonathan Taylor's just going to walk in and be like, you know what, guys, I've changed my mind. Let's go to work. Do they have to deal him?
Well, Cam Akers was in the same pot last year, and he started playing well toward the end of the season. I think he wanted to play well toward the end of the season to up his value. When his value didn't get up, he was still a little bit disgruntled this year, and so he moves on. Who knows what's going to happen? Because in this business, you're here one day, gone the next, and there's no gradual leaving of a team. Nobody says, okay, we're going to cut you in 3 weeks and enjoy your time around your teammates for the next 3 weeks, and then you're going to be gone. It doesn't work that way. 1 week you are a Colt or a Dolphin or a Raven or a Packer, and then the next day you are unemployed.
That is true. That tends to be the way that it works. Just another minute or two here with James Lofton as we get ready for Ravens-Colts Sunday at 1 on CBS. James, I wonder, I mentioned earlier the murderer's row in the AFC. Is it simply is the story, hey, who's going to stay the healthiest, and we get to January, or is there a way for one of these teams, whether it's the Ravens, the Dolphins have obviously looked good early, to separate themselves from this insane group of quarterbacks and high-level teams in the AFC?
Well, you can't separate yourself from the high-level teams because they're going to be there at the end, either as divisional winners or wild card participants. And you're right. In the AFC, there are a lot of good quarterbacks and a lot of quarterbacks who are in that upper echelon of pay. So those guys are going to be around when the season is winding down, and you just got to go out and compete against them.
Anyone in particular that, is really jumped off the page at you in the early couple of weeks of you doing games?
Well, we had the Los Angeles Chargers last week when they went in to play the Tennessee Titans, and so we had also watched that game from week one with Justin Herbert, and he's a tremendous talent, but he's kind of sitting there on the outside because if you look at their last three ball games, and I'm tossing in last year's
right, the
playoff loss
Jaguars.
to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and so there's a talented guy who may be out of the loop when you talk about who's going to be there at the end.
How do you explain that, Jay? Like, how is it that someone that's that good, they just haven't? I don't know. I'm not blaming him. I don't know who to blame. It's so weird that when you have such a talent and seemingly have surrounded him with talent, you haven't been able to do more with it as a team.
Well, over the years, what I've learned is that if you're on offense, you can point your finger at the defense the first couple times it happens. If you're on defense and it's the offense's problem, you point your finger at the offense. The next time, people start pointing fingers at the head coach or the coordinator and different things like that. And then all of a sudden, there's an off-season change. And so when you see these off-season changes, you know that there's been some issues. And sometimes when that head coach goes and the general manager goes, you start anew. But the players remain, especially the high-paid quarterbacks. Very rarely do they move other than a Russell Wilson.
All right. Before I let you go, the list of first-year candidates for the Hall of Fame came out this week, and one of the names that was on it was former Raven Haloti Ngata. And this is a tough one for me because there was a time in Haloti Ngata's career that I said, this guy is a Hall of Fame caliber talent, but I don't know if he had the career that stands up. When you hear the name Haloti Ngata, as someone who is very involved in this process, James, and of course wears a gold jacket yourself, do you think Hall of Famer?
Well, I am one of the selectors, and what I've realized now is how difficult it is to whittle down that list to 5, because we get a thick binder at the end of February with about 135 names in it. And I've often told some friends of mine, hey, look through this and pick out 5 guys. And they get to about number 45, and they've already picked out 5. You still got 90 more guys to go. And so it is a process that is, to me, it's painful when I go through it, because I look at the guys who I thought were great players who don't get the votes, who don't get put in. And there are a lot of great players who are out there sitting on the sidelines. A couple guys from my era that I think were Hall of Famers in Roger Craig and Everson Walls who aren't in. And they're in that senior category now. So Haloti Ngata, great player. You had to learn how to pronounce his name. And when you are good enough, when nobody can read your name the correct way and everybody knows how to say it, you know that you're a pretty good player.
There's no doubt, right? There's no doubt in my mind. But to your point, obviously, it is a really, really loaded group and a lot of great candidates. And as good as Haloti Ngata was, and, a 5-time All-Pro, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're rooting for him, obviously, here in Baltimore, but I don't know. All right, Sunday, 1 o'clock on CBS, of course. James Lofton, Beth Mowens, Jay Feely, and Amanda Renner on the call. Ravens-Colts in Baltimore. James, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for spending time with us this morning. I imagine we will be talking to you again as the season goes on and you're getting ready to do another Ravens broadcast. Really appreciate you doing this.
Hey, thanks for the time. I appreciate it.